They arrived before dawn, boots hitting the frosted concrete at RAFM **** in early 1939, and for a moment the new crews wondered if someone was playing a joke on them. These were the bombers meant for deep enemy strikes? The things parked on the hard standing looked like props from an aviation fair. Fabric skins stretched tight over thin lattice frames that thumped like a tent when you knocked on them. Flight Sergeant James Ward remembered staring at the nearest Wellington, stunned. "They've given us kites," his friend muttered. And that's exactly what it looked like, a canvas-covered relic, not a frontline weapon. Even the nickname arrived instantly, the Wimpy, lifted from Popeye's hamburger-loving cartoon character, only nobody used it with affection. Not yet. Across the channel, the Luftwaffe had sleek, all-metal Heinkel 111s and Ju 88s. By comparison, the Wellington seemed like a leftover from another decade, which in some ways it was. Barnes-Wallis had started experimenting with his geodetic structures back in 1930. That didn't stop crews from asking the same nervous questions the moment they reached an operational conversion unit. How's fabric supposed to stop flak? What happens when incendiaries hit it? Does it burn like paper? One exasperated instructor finally slammed his hand against the fuselage. Metal cracks. Metal tears. This, he said, patting the doped linen, bends and keeps flying. The crews nodded, unconvinced. Next to the all-metal Whitleys and Hamptons, the Wellington looked painfully primitive. You could walk around it and literally see the basketwork frame pressing against the linen where the dope wore thin. Ground crew repaired holes with fabric patches like they were mending shirts. The rear gunner sat inside a perspex bubble with fabric framing, fully aware a short burst could shred everything around him. And yet, by September 39, the RAF had committed 8 squadrons to this machine. What the crews didn't grasp was that Barnes-Wallis wasn't some eccentric tinkerer. By the time he turned to bombers, he'd already reshaped airship engineering with the R-100. His geodetic idea was brutally logical. Instead of relying on a few heavy spars like traditional aircraft, spars that, if hit, could doom the bomber, he built a woven structure where every strip carried part of the load. Dozens of curved duralumin members crossed in spirals, each intersection passing stress to its neighbors. Damage a strip? The load flowed around it. Damage 10. It still held together. The design didn't fail suddenly, it weakened gradually, giving the aircraft a chance to survive. So why fabric? Because the frame already carried the strength. Metal skin would add weight without benefit. Fabric didn't tear catastrophically like aluminum either. It simply punched through. The airframe kept its shape. Brooklands test pilots treated the prototype like it might fall apart in midair, but the data proved otherwise. A Wellington Mark I could take punishment that would cripple a conventional bomber and still stay airborne. At least, the math said so. Whether those numbers meant anything when German 88s were bursting around them, that was something only the Ruhr would answer. And so, as winter tightened around RAF stations in late 1939, the real test began. The same Wimpys that crews had once eyed with suspicion were now headed into their first operational flights. Yet these early missions weren't the dramatic deep strikes everyone had braced for. Bomber Command, still unsure how far the war would escalate, limited the Wellington to nickel raids, long, cold runs over Germany where the aircraft scattered propaganda leaflets instead of explosives. Crews joked it was the world's most dangerous delivery route, but the flights gave them something irreplaceable, a first look at German defenses. The tension before takeoff never eased. Squadron leader Henry Pleasance remembered men tapping the fuselage before climbing inside, half checking its solidity, half reassuring themselves. One pilot muttered, "Let's see if this kite holds together when Jerry wakes up." Nobody laughed. Everyone felt the same chill. Night operations made the fabric feel especially thin. When searchlights locked onto a Wellington, crews suddenly became hyper-aware that only doped linen separated them from the elements, and enemy fire. But theories had to give way to reality. On March 19, 1940, Wellingtons attacking a seaplane base met accurate flak. Several aircraft returned with neat holes punched through their skin and a few dented geodetic ribs. Ground crew patched them overnight with fresh fabric and dope. The same aircraft flew again the following evening. It wasn't heroic, just quietly astonishing. April brought harsher fights. During the attack on Stavanger Sola, Flight Lieutenant David Balsden's Wellington absorbed a line of cannon hits down its starboard side. He could peer straight through the missing fabric to the night outside, the geodetic frame glowing silver in the slipstream. Yet the aircraft handled almost normally, and he landed with more confusion than relief. By May and June, the pattern had become impossible to ignore. Damaged Wellingtons kept limping home with wounds that should have torn them apart. One No. 38 squadron machine returned from Mönchengladbach peppered with more than 60 holes, flying sluggish but steady. Meanwhile, Whitleys and Hamptons, all metal construction and supposedly sturdier, often came back with torn panels or cracked spars that grounded them instantly. A Wellington took a hit and got a hole. A Whitley took a hit and risked losing a wing. Gradually, Wimpy shifted from mockery to mild affection. The aircraft still looked peculiar, still rattled like a greenhouse in turbulence, but it kept delivering its crews back to England. Wireless operators tapped the fabric beside their sets as if reassuring an old friend. Rear gunners scribbled half-joking mottos inside their turrets. Nobody openly admitted they'd misjudged the design, not yet, but the doubt was wearing thin. Then came the night that removed any question at all. December 16, 1940. Mannheim. Deep in Germany. Heavy defenses. Everything the Wellington had been doubted for would be judged in a single raid. What returned in the early hours stunned even seasoned officers. Wellington L-7818 of No. 149 Squadron landed at Mildenhall with its rear fuselage flayed open, the fabric torn away in strips nearly 10 feet long. The geodetic lattice lay exposed like the bones of some strange creature, yet the aircraft had flown hundreds of miles in that condition. Sergeant Ronald Clark, the tail gunner, stepped out shaking, having watched Tracer cut through the fabric inches from his position while the aircraft somehow held shape. Another Wellington, R-1236, came back with its port wing shredded so severely that ground crew could push their heads through the holes. The skeletal frame beneath was bent and scarred but still intact. Flight Lieutenant James Penhill had flown home expecting the wing to fold at any moment. It never did. Most dramatic was No. 99 Squadron's T-2553, raked nose to tail by a night fighter. Entire sections of fabric hung loose. The interior was open to the sky. Pilot Officer Dennis Field later wrote, "I could see stars through the roof, the walls, even through the floor. We were flying a skeleton. But we were flying." Ground crew counted 127 holes. And yet the Wellington had survived. The contrast with other types from that same night was stark. Whitleys and Hamptons hit by similar fire often broke apart or lost major sections of structure. The supposedly tougher, modern metal bombers had suffered catastrophic failures that the woven Wellington simply absorbed. By dawn, photographs of the damaged Wimpys had begun circulating through stations. Engineers inspected the exposed lattice, measuring bends, studying how stress had flowed around damaged areas. And what Barnes Wallis had predicted years earlier, that damage would spread through the structure instead of collapsing it, was finally proven in combat. Crew rooms buzzed with new respect. Men compared stories of flying through the night in aircraft that were technically missing walls, floors, even ceilings. Whatever jokes remained were affectionate now. Wimpy no longer meant flimsy, it meant reliable, stubborn, almost unbelievable. And that night didn't just bring crews home. It brought certainty, and set the stage for what came next. And from there, the evidence only grew. North Africa brought a new environment, new enemies, and the same unbelievable survivals. By early 1941, Wellingtons were flying from rough desert strips in Egypt, striking Italian positions in Libya while dodging increasingly skilled German fighters supporting the Afrika Korps. If any theater should have exposed the weaknesses of fabric and geodetic construction, it was the desert. Sand worked its way into every hinge and bearing, temperatures swung from scorching afternoons to freezing nights, and damaged aircraft often had to cross hundreds of miles of hostile territory before reaching safety. Yet the Wellington kept proving its worth. In June 1941, No. 70 Squadron's Wellington Z-883 became a legend. Hit by flak over Benghazi, it lost a 6-foot section of the port wing's leading edge, not just fabric, but major structural members. The forward geodetic lattice was simply gone. Aerodynamics said the wing should have folded back immediately. Instead, Flight Lieutenant Kenneth Barker felt a violent pull to the left, countered with opposite aileron, and discovered the aircraft still obeyed him. The remaining geodetic ribs absorbed forces they were never designed for, but somehow endured. Barker flew 240 miles back across the desert, holding a constant shallow bank to offset the missing lift. The drag from the torn wing forced him to lean on rudder the whole flight, burning more fuel, but the aircraft held together. When ground crew inspected the wrecked wing at Fuca, they could hardly believe it. A conventional bomber would have broken up instantly. The Wellington hadn't. Other types weren't so lucky. A Martin, Maryland of No. 39 Squadron took a flak hit over Tripoli that cracked its stressed skin fuselage along rivet lines. The tail twisted out of alignment and the aircraft crashed attempting an emergency landing. 2 weeks later, a Blenheim's wing spar was struck over Derna. The wing folded within seconds. No survivors. Repeatedly, the same pattern appeared. Metal skins tore, cracks spread, and aircraft failed catastrophically. The Wellington lost fabric, but not structure. The reason was now obvious. Traditional stressed skin bombers depended on their metal covering to carry loads. Damage created stress points, cracks raced along rivet lines, and the airframe could unravel like a zipper. The Wellington's fabric carried no structural loads at all. It was just aerodynamic covering. Blow it off and you made the aircraft uglier, colder, and slower, but still airworthy. The geodetic lattice beneath redistributed loads through thousands of paths rather than a handful of spars. No. 40 Squadron recorded one of the most extreme examples in August 1941. A Wellington returned from Tamimi with nearly one entire side of the rear fuselage stripped bare. The fabric was gone across an area the size of a small room. Tail gunner Sergeant Harold Wisdom could practically touch the slipstream with his hand. More critically, the rudder cables ran through that section, yet the Wellington's redundant routing kept them functional. The aircraft finished its mission and flew home without losing control. By late 1941, crews had stopped debating the matter. They'd seen too many impossible returns. One pilot summed up the new attitude succinctly. "Jerry can shoot holes in us all night. We'll wave at him on the way back." Operational research supported what the aircrews already knew. Hamptons, Blenheims, and the new Sterling all suffered catastrophic structural failures from relatively small hits. Flak that merely punched holes in a Wellington could peel metal panels off the others. A Sterling lost near Hamburg in July 1941 went from first hit to structural failure in 8 seconds. The numbers were stark. In 1941, Wellingtons flew over 37,000 sorties. Only about 40 losses were attributed to structural failure, a fraction compared to metal bombers. The geodetic frame didn't break, it degraded slowly, predictably, survivably. Side-by-side operations confirmed the contrast. In October 1941, 3 Wellingtons and 2 Sterlings were hit over Bremen. All 3 Wellingtons came home, one with over 80 documented holes. Both Sterlings were lost. Same flak. Same night. Same skill. The only difference was construction. By 1942, even the skeptics had been won over. Letters, diaries, and post-war memoirs from Wellington crews tell the story in their own words. Flight Sergeant Thomas Murray admitted he'd once mocked the fabric kite, but after 3 heavily damaged returns, he preferred it to anything metal. Pilot Officer Robert Valratha's letters home chart a similar shift, from calling it a circus tent with engines to declaring he wouldn't trade it for any modern bomber. Wireless operators, sitting beside the geodetic ribs every mission, trusted it most. They learned to ignore the cold drafts blowing through new holes and take comfort in how the structure flexed instead of tearing. Rear gunners echoed the sentiment. After watching cannon shells rip through fabric without collapsing the airframe, many said they feared everything except the Wellington itself. Some pilots held doubts longer, but even they eventually came around. Flight Lieutenant James Burton of No. 9 Squadron wrote that he didn't truly believe in the Wellington until March 1943, when his already damaged aircraft lost an engine over the Ruhr. Even then, fabric flapping, structure exposed, it stayed controllable and brought the crew home. That night changed his mind completely. And by then, the Wellington wasn't just a bomber. It was the aircraft crews trusted with their lives, and it had earned every bit of that trust. And with that shift in attitude, the nickname changed completely. By mid-1942, Wimpy was no longer an insult but a badge of honor. Ground crews painted it proudly on noses, sometimes with cartoons. One 419 Squadron machine even carried Wimpy the Unbreakable, Popeye's friend landing a punch on a German fighter, a perfect reversal of the early mockery. Squadron leader Leonard Cheshire, who flew Wellingtons before moving to Halifax's, put it best, we first laughed at them. Then they saved our lives again and again. And then we missed them when we moved on. What had looked odd and outdated proved itself in the hardest possible environment, and aircrews learned to trust results over appearances. The operational record backed that trust. Between September 1939 and October 1945, Wellingtons flew 47,409 bombing operations. Not sorties, but full multi-aircraft missions. Total sorties passed 100,000, a tempo unmatched by any other British bomber. Loss rates told the deeper truth. During the peak of the 1942-43 offensive, the Wellington's average loss rate hovered around 3.4% per sortie, compared with 5.2% for the Sterling and 4.8% for the Hampton. A few percentage points on paper meant everything in practice. A Wellington crew had roughly two-thirds odds of finishing a 30-mission tour, while Sterling crews barely reached half. That difference represented hundreds of men who lived because of the geodetic frame. Longevity told the same story. The Air Ministry once expected the type to fade from frontline use by 1942. It didn't happen. No. 75 Squadron flew Wellingtons until late 1943 because availability rates routinely exceeded 80%, while early Sterlings struggled to reach 50%. A bomber that could be patched with fabric and dope overnight, instead of requiring major structural work, stayed useful long after its supposed replacements arrived. Beyond Europe, the Wellington served even longer. No. 37 Squadron used it for anti-submarine patrols in the Mediterranean until early 1945. No. 14 Squadron kept theirs flying in the Middle East until May the same year. The final bombing mission by a Wellington took place in October 1945 in Italy, nearly 6 years after its combat debut. No other British bomber remained on the front line for so long. Its versatility also kept it indispensable. Wellingtons hunted submarines with lee lights, carried depth charges, conducted maritime reconnaissance, trained thousands of crews, tested early radar, and even served as torpedo bombers. No. 415 Squadron destroyed multiple U-boats using Wellington-dropped depth charges throughout 1943. The same geodetic frame that survived flak held up to the stresses of low-level ocean patrols. Production numbers told the Air Ministry's confidence. 11,461 Wellingtons built, second only to the Lancaster among British bombers. And when the Wellington finally left frontline bombing in 1943, it wasn't because it failed, simply because heavier four-engine types carried far larger loads at greater distances. The Wellington had reached the limits of what it was designed for. Crews in 1945 no longer questioned the fabric skin or unusual structure. They'd trained in Wellingtons, trusted them instinctively, and had no memory of the pre-war ridicule. By then, the aircraft was the very definition of reliability. The journey from skepticism to loyalty was complete. Post-war analysis confirmed everything crews had believed. Between 1946 and 1948, the Royal Aircraft Establishment examined surviving Wellingtons and recovered wrecks. Their findings were blunt. Geodetic construction suffered far fewer catastrophic failures, roughly 60% lower than conventional stressed-skin aircraft. German engineers studying captured Wellingtons during the war had reached similar conclusions. A 1942 report from the Rechlin Test Center even admitted, the English basket frame absorbs damage in ways our calculations cannot explain. Further study recommended. But Germany never adopted the system. It was too labor-intensive, too far from their established methods. And that explained why geodetic construction disappeared despite its strengths. A Wellington fuselage needed around 11,000 individually manufactured pieces. A Lancaster required roughly 2,000. Building a Wellington fuselage took 800 man-hours, a Lancaster 350. In wartime, mass production mattered as much as durability. Four-engined heavies could be built faster and carried triple the bomb load. Even if they were more fragile, they could simply be replaced in greater numbers. Harsh logic, but unavoidable. Aerodynamics imposed limits too. Fabric covering worked at Wellington speeds and altitudes, but not beyond 300 miles per hour or above 25,000 feet. Removing the fabric and switching to metal skin eliminated the weight advantage and left an overly complex, heavier structure. Early jets, flying higher, hotter, and much faster, made geodetic frameworks obsolete within a few years. Yet the Wellington's influence lived on. Modern aircraft still apply the principle it demonstrated so dramatically. Structures must fail gracefully, with multiple load paths and built-in redundancy. Today this is called damage-tolerant or fail-safe design, ideas shaped in no small part by the Wellington's wartime performance. The final Wellington, AT.10 trainer, flew in March 1953. By then, its wartime crews were civilians again, remembering the bomber that looked outdated but refused to die. A machine mocked at its birth had ended as one of the war's great lifesavers, and no later innovation could diminish what it achieved when it was needed most.